Okay.
All right.
So today we're talking with someone who helps unlock the power of communication. An entrepreneur, who successfully balances a career, business, and a family life. Mila Grushin, a speech therapist, co-owner of Exceptional Explorers in Livingston, New Jersey. Welcome to the 24/11.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Hi, Alex.
I loved that introduction. I was very,
I know.
It was a good introduction.
Made me sound very important.
All right, so I guess tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, after that introduction, I feel like you've covered the main points, but I guess that I define myself as a mom, first of all. A mom to 3 kids. I'm very lucky to have my children. I am a speech therapist. So I have a lot more kids at work that I treat as my own and I care for, and I try to make their lives better and help them find their voice. And help them understand their school curriculum. I am a wife, a daughter, and more recently, I became a business owner. So I'm still learning to navigate that, I guess, sphere of my life.
Well, what inspired you to become a speech therapist?
So I've always been interested in the medical field. I, for many years, envisioned being a doctor. But as I learned a little bit more about the requirements in medical school, the financial assets that are required, I found that a bit overbearing. Coming from an immigrant family, being raised by just a mom and a grandmother, it just seemed so unattainable. Leaving to medical school and the loans that would come with it. And somewhere down the line during my high school years, I learned of speech therapy. I was always naturally, I think, a teacher and great with kids. And so I found speech therapy to be a great middle ground, sort of a marriage of the two, where I could still get my medical fix and work in the medical world if I wish to do so. And that's actually where I did a lot of my practicum semesters. And at the same time, I could apply my natural talent of teaching and working with children. So that is...
Is that what kind of drove that? Did you want to work with children?
I mean, there was certainly a big element in it. I feel like I do find a common language. I feel like I connect well with kids. I, could get down on their level and play with them, but in the process, turn that into learning experiences and learning opportunities. Yes.
I think it's like an amazing reason to go into it. I thought it might have been King's Speech, the movie that won the Oscar. No,
that was not the movie, but I did watch it while being in school, and was very much intrigued and interested because I didn't know that myself. But one thing we did learn during our first semester of speech was just famous people and celebrities who have stuttered over the, and have had to overcome their stuttering. And I remember being very much surprised at certain names. At this point, I won't be able to list many, but I even think Marilyn Monroe was on that list at some point.
I mean, we don't have to go far, and this is not a political statement. Joe Biden always had a speech impediment, and I think that's a credit to him for achieving, obviously, one of the highest positions and heights, right? And despite the speech impediment, or the stutter, right? I don't. When you listen to people, like people who are in the public view, who have something or struggling with something speech related, do you notice that? Or
often, I can't help it. Yes, right. Me and my speech therapy friends tend to diagnose our friends, celebrities, and politicians alike all the time.
And obviously, so you think
I'm not going to speak for the rest of the podcast,
right? No, me too. I feel so conscious now that.
So no, because like I've been told that I swallow my words, and it's very hard being, especially like in terms of what we're doing right now. I try, but you forget because you start talking, and I also think a lot, I was told, instead of just talking. So I think, and that's why I stop and whatever. But now I'm going to be conscious about it.
But that's actually a great strategy to take your time to analyze before speaking. I think many people don't take their time, and as a result, their speech comes out mumbled and articulate.
Because the brain works faster than the speech, right? And that's, I always also noticed that I wanted to say one thing and then something else comes out.
But yeah, I mean, speech therapists work with people who are, in the field of public speaking. My brother-in-law is a very successful entrepreneur, and he's worked with many speech therapists to reduce his accent,
Right.
to just feel more confident and comfortable presenting in front of larger audiences. So that is certainly something you could learn.
So when you go into school, when you pursue this career, they teach you everything, developmental speech, and then working with adults as well, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that's something, that's interesting. And I guess maybe, coming from a medical field, doctors probably experience that too, where you have to try a little bit of everything. But yes, we get thrown into so many different classes, from swallowing to articulation to social skills. And you're sort of a jack of all trades when you come out of the school. Some people tend to find their niche and they get really good at one particular sphere of language, whereas others who work maybe in the school system have a slightly broader knowledge of everything.
So I feel like I could relate coming out of law school. They don't really, for the most part, teach
Just
you
throw
to be
that in there.
yeah, let me throw that. Yeah. Well, I mean, because you come out and it's wherever your profession takes you is really what you're going to become an expert in, unless you kind of have some kind of a predetermined trajectory. So I didn't know that with speech pathology is kind of the same thing, right? It's whatever you choose to focus on after you graduate, right?
Exactly.
How many years is the whole process? Like after you finish high school, so.
Right. So it is a requirement to have a master's degree. So it's 4 years of college and then grad school, depending on the program you choose, anywhere from 2 to 3 years. And then you have to do also a year of a CFY, which is in essence almost like a short residency with a mentor until you get a full-time position.
Is it hard to land a mentor, or the school helps you with that?
Yes, being in a school, you definitely get assigned someone. It's a little harder, I think, if you are working privately, but I don't know many people who come out and right away start something on their own.
Right.
So you either are in a clinic or a hospital or a school setting with other providers there who tend to take that job of a mentor.
Do you feel all that schooling is necessary, or you really learn once you practice?
In my field in particular, I think schooling is important, but of course you can't beat experience.
Right.
Just a good example, this year I have an intern with me. She's a great girl. She's very studious. But at the same time, watching her with my students, I very much see, just how fresh she is and how she's applying everything she learned in school. But it really does take experience, because oftentimes you could have the best plan in the world,
Right.
but something just is not working. The student's not responding, and you have to think on your feet, think on the spot, modify, sometimes throw out the whole lesson out the window and pull out a material that's been getting dusty in your closet, but that could be the right fit at that moment for that student.
So you're constantly adjusting the plan, right?
Absolutely.
It's very
Yes.
case specific, right?
Very case specific. So you're sort of like a detective to investigating, picking up on clues and making changes after each session, because, you have goals to meet and you want to show progress to parents, to the students themselves, to teachers. So you always have to be figuring out what's working, what's not working, what are you going to tweak for next time.
So you said you're mentoring an intern right now, and obviously you're probably noticing the challenges that they're facing. What are the challenges that you came across? They're in school.
Challenges early in my career.
Well, even in school, like what was I guess maybe harder, or maybe something that you needed to get across.
So generally, I've always been very studious. I can't say I found school particularly challenging. It was just more about the time I had to give. So for me, the challenge was, how do I balance my social life and the school? That was always my challenge. For many years, I prioritized my schooling. And at some point in my graduate school, I felt like
Enough
is enough. Yes, I started to focus a little more on my social life. Not that was always on the back burner, but just like I said, it was always a struggle trying to figure out how much of myself do I give to my school versus my friends and family.
Is it like in high school, the last year is not that important?
No, I actually think your last year of grad school is particularly important, because that's when you have your most important internships, your most challenging internships. And that's where you also, build your network and you connect with people who down the line could very well be there to help you when you're looking for a job.
Also, for those who are maybe interested in pursuing this path, what's the process? So you went right out of college, you had to take some kind of entrance exam, and then
Yes, there's a praxis exam you take through school. You have to get your state license. There is also ASHA, which is a board that certifies speech therapists. So you do get a certification through them. So working in the school alone, I needed to maintain my teaching certificate, my state license, my ASHA certificate, and I have to keep track of, continuing ed credits that are required that are required by each specific organization or department. I had to also apply for a PIN through Medicaid, like a health provider PIN that doctors have as well, because we do bill insurance, even working in the school system.
I see.
Even though it's done by the school, but I have to write my medical notes as a medical provider because the schools do get reimbursed from the state.
Right. And getting into speech pathology school, was that competitive? Was that did you have to take GREs, or how does that work?
Oh, now you're making me revisit.
I'm trying to, I don't know if it was a nightmare or stressful, or everyone's trying to get into the schools they want to go.
Well, so you know what? I majored in speech therapy straight out of high school. Mm-hmm. So at that point, it was just, SATs, your school grades. The programs tend to be competitive just because they tend to be much smaller than a lot of other majors. So, we didn't have more than 30 students, I believe, in my class. So
where'd you go to school?
Undergrad, I went to NYU.
And that was it had a program that went straight into grad school for that?
So they did, but I chose not to stay. I wanted to try something else. So I was accepted into Teachers College at Columbia University. So that's where I got my graduate degree. Once
you got your teacher's degree, right? Then you had to go for more schooling, or that already was sufficient?
So my degree is in speech language pathology, but in order to work in a school, I did have to take some exams that would qualify me as a teacher, because working in a school, every provider has to have a teaching certification. So that's in addition to my speech therapy license.
Right.
I had to Google speech pathology and speech therapy before we got this interview. I was like, is there a difference between
They're
them?
Interchangeable. Speech pathology sounds fancier.
And I didn't want to offend you. I was like, listen, I'm going to say one thing. And then she's like, whoa, I'm not a speech therapist. I'm a speech pathologist.
In the school, I tend to be called a speech teacher sometimes too. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I've learned to accept that title as well.
You're okay with it, basically, yeah.
How's that in school? Like, what is it? Do they actually have classes where you help children, or is that like a general class?
Oh, I mean, again, even within the school system, there's so many different variations. For some students who are more severe, who need more support, you have one-on-one therapy, which is your true clinical model, the one that I came out of grad school being most familiar with. We do sometimes do push-in sessions, which is where a therapist is encouraged to come into the classroom because there might be some very specific nuanced challenges that a teacher needs help with. She can't support the students in the way that she knows how to. So we may push in and sit alongside of a student and come up with a program that is individualized to help them meet their curriculum for that class or grade. There are also group sessions, which the Department of Education likes because it's a little bit cheaper if you see multiple students at the same time. But there are definitely some benefits to that as well. Some students work very well with peer models. And there are also students who specifically struggle with their social skills. So having a session that is structured to really help them tap into their challenge of interacting, making connections with their peers. Things that we sometimes, take for granted, just starting up a conversation,
right?
Or making friends. Some students have a very hard time, even though they want to. And that does fall under the, social umbrella. And there could be some true social deficits that they have to overcome.
So a speech therapist could address that as well.
Yep. So that's considered like the pragmatic aspect of language. And we have classes dedicated just to that. Commonly, you probably are well familiar with kids on the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. In my school in particular, we have a program called NEST, and that is dedicated specifically to students with social difficulties. They are your average kids when it comes to their academic skills, but they have a lot of quirks or just challenges connecting with others. So their therapy sessions are always group therapy sessions. We do a lot of projects that try to challenge them. So the areas where they're really struggling with, like problem solving, executive functioning, making a plan, reacting appropriately, regulating their emotions, we tap into that during those projects they work on with their peers and address these particular challenges throughout the year. And over time, you do see improvement, you see progress. It doesn't happen after a few sessions.
Right.
Social skills take a while to build up, but over time, you definitely see a lot of kids mature, learn, and apply them, outside of a therapy setting.
It's interesting that falls into the speech therapy umbrella, all of those issues, right? Or do you also work together with occupational therapists in the school, or is it like a combined approach, or is it?
Yes. I mean, we don't often do side-by-side therapy sessions simply because Medicaid wouldn't cover two therapists
So
working
all of this
once.
gets covered by federal healthcare benefits, right?
Yes, in the school system. So yes, in a private world, I think there are a lot of therapists working together. And even within the Department of Education, we work closely with therapists. Sometimes we align our therapy sessions to be working on very similar skills, just looking at them from more of a communication angle, whereas the occupational therapist might be looking at it from more of a
motor skills, right?
Motor skills, as well as they also focus a lot on organization skills in middle school kids.
I feel like we didn't have those kind of services
Options.
offered to us, right?
Yeah,
there was no one,
or maybe we never really applied for them. I mean, I don't know. Do you have to be in a specific group, or do you have to have some kind of an application for this program or something like that as a student?
Yes. You do have to qualify. Oftentimes, your teachers would have recommended you for an evaluation. Even during the times when we were in school, we're not that old, those kind of services existed. They were there. I just think that, we fortunately didn't need the support.
So do you also do you go to different places, like house visits and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah. I did a lot of early intervention straight out of school. That was actually something I enjoyed very much because I worked very close with parents. Being a speech therapist and working with students once, twice, even 3 times a week for 30 minutes doesn't yield huge results, especially in a short period of time. Going to home allowed me to see the natural environment the kids are in, where they're lacking most, encourage parents to set up their play areas with more language stimulating activities, just having the parents observe me work with their kids and giving them some pointers on how they could elicitate more language from their kids. So that was definitely a great experience because that's where I think I saw the most progress.
Do you feel like there's a growing demand for that kind of therapy? Do you feel there are more cases or like autism or other issues? Or is it just because we're more adept to diagnosing them now as opposed to before?
Right. I think truthfully, there's probably it's a combination of both. I do think we are a lot more attuned to kids and their needs. I think that we're trying to support and make sure that every child has access to proper education. With that comes services like speech and OT and physical therapy in the school system. So I think that we do recognize and do a better job at diagnosing today. But at the same time, it does appear to be that there seems to be an increased number of students with communication disorders, in particular with autism spectrum. With the growing population, there's definitely a need for increased services.
I don't know if you want to comment on that, can you attribute it to anything that has been discussed in the circles of professionals that deal with these issues in kids?
So there, to my knowledge, to all the research I have read, I don't think that there is a single factor that they've been able to point to and say, this is it. Certainly there's many theories that I think a lot of people have heard and are familiar with, but it seems to be that there's does seem to be a genetic component involved. Oftentimes it is seen in families. Once there is one child on the spectrum, the chances of subsequent kids increases significantly. Of course, people have considered everything from vaccines to food. Certain theories are less popular than others. But I do believe in the fact that there has to be some environmental factors involved as well.
I'm interested. We talked about all these things, but like these trivial things that would apply from your profession to me. Like, once again, we touched upon celebrities or politicians that do have some kind of a speech issue or whatnot, but yet they're still able to be successful. And do they manage it? Do they just be themselves? Can you manage it if you're already so far along in your development? It's like you're an adult, right? Can you really change anything? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it definitely becomes harder with age.
Right.
This is why actually early intervention is government funded, because it's been proven that until age 3, your brain is so malleable that you really could make the most change. After puberty in particular, it becomes a lot harder. But of course, research shows if you're determined, if you're set on it, you will have to put more effort, more time, but you could make adjustments and improve whatever it is that you're trying to work on, unless, of course, there's neurological factors that are getting in the way of improvement.
For instance, give me an example of a neurological factor.
Well, neurological, so it could be something like post-stroke or traumatic brain injury, where your nerves are just firing differently. Now, of course, with therapy, you could still make improvements, and that's the point of rehabilitation after such traumatic events in your life. But for let's just say a neurotypical healthy person who is maybe looking to work on their sound production or their delivery of speeches to an audience, or even social interactions, those are the kind of skills that you could definitely continue to work on and improve well into adulthood. And it's all about how much time you're willing to dedicate to that, because of course the older you are, the harder it is to break these habits.
And how do you diagnose someone? Like when you're listening to someone, whether it's a patient, how do you diagnose? Most
of the impediments and disorders do get diagnosed by actual medical professionals, neurologists. So once we get our clients, they often come to us already with a diagnosis. Now, we, of course, being experienced and having worked with so many different people, could pick up on certain signs and cues and symptoms and have a pretty good understanding of what the diagnosis is without one. Personally, I don't do any diagnosing myself.
So speech therapists in general do not diagnose. They accept patients once they get referred to them, right?
Generally, yes. But at the same time, diagnosis is not as important. We on our end do our own evaluations to determine which areas of language need to be worked on. And of course that, we work with our patients and clients to see what is it that they come to us for. But I, as a therapist, often focus on the problem, and the diagnosis is not really as important to me, but more about, what's their functional level right now, where do they want to be, and what are the steps I need to get there. And of course, I'll keep their diagnosis in mind if I'm aware, but oftentimes that is not something that is very important in the way I structure or plan my therapy sessions.
Do you work with adults?
Not at the moment, but my last internship actually in graduate school was at Mount Sinai Medical Center, where I worked primarily with adults after stroke or traumatic brain injuries. Yes, which was a very interesting and probably one of my most challenging experiences, because speech in general is not a true medical emergency, as we understand. As my professor in college would say, no one's going to call you in the middle of the night because there's a speech emergency.
But it's such an important part of human life, right? Communication. I mean, that's fundamental, right?
But working in the hospital, doing my internship at Mount Sinai, a lot of it was life or death. We used to do a lot of swallowing evaluations to determine even the kind of diets that were safe for some of these patients post-stroke, whether they could hold their liquids or not, could they aspirate on their liquids, and we had to make the determination what kind of diet we would recommend. So that was probably the first time in my life where I felt like I do have to make decisions that could affect someone's life. Yes.
I keep hearing that post-swallowing and swallowing. Like, is that like a big... No, I'm saying, is it like a big thing?
It's a favorite topic among my friends, especially male friends.
Do you see
they want to know more.
she's like, I know who you are.
My husband definitely told me more about that class you're taking.
No. But like, so I actually didn't think that far. But here's the thing. So I know you guys, you have your own terms and everything. So maybe some people who are listening, just like me, might have like heard that over and over, and like, is it something that diagnoses something, or?
Well, yeah. So, just like your speech could be affected after a stroke, for example, because of certain changes to your musculature, your swallowing could get affected. So because we use a lot of similar muscles and they're so interconnected, oftentimes if you have facial weakness, you're going to have a very hard time chewing and processing your food, because chewing is the first step of digestion. So yeah, we have courses on swallowing and swallowing disorders.
So I may need to take a course, because I didn't explain what I meant correctly. What I mean is that in terms of does swallowing have anything to do with speech? Because I kept hearing swallowing. Yeah. I know it was funny, but that's actually not what I meant.
It was not funny to me.
What I meant was, does swallowing have to do anything with the way you pronounce things, or?
No, not particularly, but because we learn so much about the muscles and nerves in your face, your neck, your upper body. A lot of these same muscles and nerves do play a role in speaking and eating. So if you're experiencing tongue weakness, poor lip closure, asymmetry, it could affect your speech, but similarly, it could affect your swallowing.
Does your profession affect the way you behave? Like the way you speak or whatever?
I think my profession and learning a lot about development of kids has taught me to be very cognizant of kids' behavior, but also how my words and behavior could affect them in the short and in the long run. So I think that it definitely played a role in how I interact with not just my students, but with people and kids in particular.
Is there something in particular that drives you? Like, what's the passion element of your craft, of your profession?
I think just seeing smiles on the kids' faces. I definitely enjoy when my students value our work together. Being in middle school right now, it's a challenging time with, not only am I working with teenagers that are just, I think, rebellious and defined by nature, but when you add this element of there might be a disability and I'm there to work with them, oftentimes that is not what they want to do, because they don't want to be different from their peers.
Right.
So speech therapy, unlike with early intervention or elementary school, which I've experienced with, they're not eager to see you when you come to pick them up, right, or when they are scheduled for their services. And it almost becomes, before therapy, I have to become their friend. Right. Before therapy, I have to connect with them. Right. I have to establish a rapport with them where I'm not just a therapist, but I'm someone who they enjoy spending time with, right, and I could help them. So that's sort of also been a challenge working in middle school. And when I do see that the kids see what I want them to see from me, that I really want to be their friend and I really want to connect with them to help them, that's something that drives me, yes.
All right. So, exceptional explorers. Yes. How did you get to that idea?
Sort of a combination of a few things. When I moved out to New Jersey and I had my daughter, I didn't know too many people in the area. I was desperately looking for mommy and me classes and to meet other parents with little ones. There wasn't anything in Livingston. I often found myself traveling to nearby towns, Chatham, Maplewood, which are not far, but I always felt like there should be something closer to home. And around the same time, my cousin was doing certain classes, geography-themed classes with kids. She's an occupational therapist, so they were doing a lot of arts and crafts involving geography and learning about other cultures and countries through her arts and crafts activities. And it almost seemed like it was a natural when we combined the need for a play space in town with her idea that these classes are extremely popular. We initially wanted to rent out a space and try running these classes together. Speaking of OT and speech therapists working together side by side. But we ran into some issues renting space. There were just too many regulations. Landlords didn't want to rent space out for specific things. So one thing led to another, and we decided to try to open up our own facility where we would hold those classes. And then it just, while it was getting built, or even in the process of us searching, it sort of grew from just a space to hold classes to a whole indoor playground.
Do you want to elaborate what Exceptional Explorers
I was going to say.
Yeah, so...
Right. So Exceptional Explorers is, in short, it's an indoor playground. And it's an indoor playground that was designed by a speech and OT. We definitely took our background, our knowledge on kids development and produced a space that would allow growing bodies to explore, to test their limits, to learn about their capabilities. And at the same time, there were enough opportunities for language growth and new vocabulary learning. So it's a facility that allows also parents to come together of kids of similar age, get to know each other, for the opportunity for play dates, to host birthday parties. And we also hold classes that encourage language growth and just expose kids to literature and physical activities.
And I saw you also have like artists coming, right? They sing with the kids.
We have teachers. A lot of them are college students who are in one way or another working with kids themselves, counselors, future therapists. We do have some of our staff are musicians and teachers who have full-time jobs and either practice this as a side job or just we're looking for an opportunity to interact with kids because that's what they like.
It's not like a regular one of those play gyms where it's like, here's the socks, here's the trampoline, just go for an hour.
No, I mean, we do have open play opportunities as well, but even within that, we when we train our staff, we always encourage them to interact with the kids. Some kids are really good independently to roam around and find activities for them to do, whereas others really need that adult support, a little more structure, a little more modeling, and that's what we encourage our staff to do.
Is there the therapy element to it? So there's play, and then you work as using under the license using
right. So no, that is something we've explored and considered. We haven't done that yet. Not to say that we haven't considered, but there is a fine line, and we did design the space to be primarily for recreational and enrichment purposes, but it is not a true PT gym you would see if you do need true therapy.
That's under insurance and all of that.
We don't have the necessary kinds of equipment to qualify as a medical facility. But with that being said, a therapist could really hold a therapy session in any setting. And the goal of therapy is always to make children be able to function in their natural environments. So this is one of their natural environments. So you could potentially hold a therapy session in a space like this.
And I understand you and your cousin, you bring in your backgrounds into the way you formulate the programs, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So whenever we are working with somebody who is doing a class that involves more motor development, physical activity, my cousin is involved, whereas it's an arts and crafts class that includes literature component, interacting with kids, asking questions to grow their vocabulary. I help with the curriculum planning of that.
So what was if you don't mind sharing, what was the process of starting something like that?
Yeah, I mean, finding facility, the space alone took some time. Livingston is a bit of an older town with very small spaces to run. So I'm
sorry. Did you originally want to start the business with your cousin? Was this like a plan before anything even started?
Yes. To be quite honest with you, it was really her brainchild. After, as I said, after complaining to her that I have to travel to take my daughter to classes, she was the one who had suggested maybe we take my idea of holding classes and turn this into something else. So yes, it was definitely her idea. My mom always warned me not to go into business with family.
You kind of went right into the other question, but good.
I was waiting. So
it is definitely something I considered for sure, because my cousin is my best friend. She is my closest family member. I love her dearly. And I can't imagine my life without her. So certainly going into this business, we had to sit down and we had to put some ground rules that we come first and our relationship comes before the business. We also promise each other to be understanding. We both have families, jobs, things come up. We're going to pick up when someone else is really struggling. And we've been doing that ever since. There have been some disagreements, but they were very cordial. And I could proudly say that now, 4 years later, we haven't had any true major disagreements.
And I'm sure you memorialized it in like a operating agreement or something like that, right? You guys discussed all
definitely,
your roles,
yes. We certainly worked with the lawyer just to be on the safe side about, just how the business gets split and responsibilities. But to be honest, we haven't referred to it since it was drafted.
Did you guys both have your own lawyers? Was that awkward?
No, it wasn't that fancy. It was one lawyer, a friend from town who helped us out.
I guess signed conflicts of interest waivers.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot more.
Sorry, I had to.
A lot more informal than that.
Okay.
But maybe had I met you a few years before.
No, it's great. So you built the place?
We did from scratch.
Oh, wow. So that's a project in itself.
One that we didn't realize that we were really undertaking. I think we were very naive. We hired an architect, one who had some prior experience with children's play spaces, or more like playgrounds. So this was a new experience for him as well. So we kind of researched and learned together. But he was certainly there guiding us from the professional angle of an architect that we obviously lacked. And,
I think any construction project is you always think like, we'll just add here, we'll call this, we'll do that. And then it blows up out of proportion. You just had a renovation, right? Did that go smoothly?
We're still working on it. It's a work a work in process.
Also, you're dealing with ordinances and municipalities, right?
Absolutely.
And then sometimes it could be inhibitive, or sometimes they could be proactive because they want development in the area. What was your experience?
Getting permitting was not easy. Livingston is not a simple town. I can't say disagree. They want to make sure that things are done right, that things are done safe. But getting, permits took a very long time. We found the space, I want to say, in November of 2019, but it took about a year for us to really, now I'm thinking maybe I'm wrong with the timeline. Maybe it was November 2018. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm not going to
Yeah.
go into the years right now, but it took about a year from the time when we found the space to the time that we had the permits and were able to start the work.
So was there any help from municipality? I think you had like a grand opening with the ribbon cutting, right? Like, I don't know who those people were, but
Right. So,
We
you know what?
Googled it.
In a small town, in a
we do our research. That's a plug.
You know what? In a small town, that is very common. The ribbon cutting. I was also really impressed when I found out the mayor is coming to our grand opening. But I think it sounds fancier than it really is. It's a common procedure for someone from town to come represent an opening of a new business. Even though Livingston is not super small, we do have somewhere between 30 to 40,000 residents. But so for a New Jersey town, it's actually fairly large. But you don't have new businesses opening up daily. So it is something that's recognized by the community. Of course, they encourage it.
Is this something that I assume the community really benefits from, right?
I'm sure also
Child services, I think, are in such high demand from what I understand.
this was also the first of its kind in our town. There always seems to be a complaint that we have too many banks and nail salons. So people are always excited when a different type of business opens in the area. We also opened during COVID. There were not too many
You're just
businesses.
taking all the questions. You just got
There were not too many businesses opening during
Yeah, I
that
can
time.
imagine.
So we definitely had a lot of local politicians pop in to say their hellos and wish us good luck on that journey.
Make sure you're wearing a mask.
Yes.
I see. How was that? I mean, it was challenging, I bet.
It was extremely. Probably we should have held off a little more on opening, but the space was ironically due to open in April of 2020. So,
Right. So you had no way of, I mean, you didn't know about this. You planned way before
Yes,
that, right?
yes.
Everything was, when did you get you did the permits? When was that?
so that's what I was trying to remember. I believe it. I mean, we definitely started the work in 2019. I think we found the space in November of 2018. So it took some time.
Yeah.
It wasn't a quick process. So we had no idea of knowing. Our landlord worked with us initially. He gave us a few more months. In April of 2020, it would be impossible to open. But that's not to say that when we opened in August of 2020, that things were much easier.
So the landlord, so it was a lease? Like a
We did sign a lease.
okay.
Yes.
And he had the land, I guess, because you built right on top of it, right? Or you
So
converted the existing structure?
So we are an plaza. It's very common in New Jersey. You have everything from fancy and high-end restaurants to hair salons. On a plaza, it's just, I guess, convenient.
As soon as you go away from the city, everything is in the plaza.
Yes. So a strip mall in a sense. So yes, the landlord had the space. It was a newly renovated plaza, but the space was sort of blank slate, and we had to make some structural changes to fit our design, which he was okay with. So yeah.
Any other obstacles except the pandemic and
Well, pandemic was an obstacle that we're still dealing with the after effect. I mean, to be quite honest with you, the first year it was very hard to get patronage because you are as a new business establishing yourself in the community. It's hard even in times of stability, but you add a pandemic where people are super careful, super cautious, and we're an indoor playground. So if you think of it, I mean, children are carriers of germs and everyone's aware of that. And we were always very cognizant of it, and we, building our space, were aware of that. So we always had a lot of cleaning procedures in place, but obviously we had to take it to a whole other level when we opened during COVID.
were there any plans for like a remote gym?
So not a remote gym,
What,
but
they play at their own house?
Well, I said it as a joke, but I'm assuming she actually has something to say about that.
Believe it or not, when there was a lot of questions about what's going to happen to the school year and people wondering what are their kids going to do, or school's going to open, some parents who had to be physically at work didn't know how to manage. So we did, for a very short time, offer a remote option where parents were able to bring their children to our space, and in our classroom, our staff would help them log on for their remote school sessions and support them that way. To be honest with you, it didn't pick up It wasn't super successful. We had few regular customers, few signups, but we were still a new business establishing ourselves. And I think a lot of people just didn't know about us. So they went to community centers, and a lot of preschools in the area started offering classes for school-age kids, even if it was just to be able to log on to their remote public school classes.
How was marketing? How did you approach that?
Well, because we didn't have a lot of finances to work with, considering we opened during COVID and we spent a lot of the money we thought we may be able to apply towards marketing to purchase machines to clean the space and cleaning supplies. We ended up doing a lot ourselves. We took a lot of marketing courses, especially those offered by Facebook themselves. We boosted our own posts to reach local members of the community. And we did do some marketing events around town. We set up booths. Once our town started holding again and inviting vendors for various carnivals and town activities, such as trunk or treat, we made sure to be there for that.
So how long have you been living? You're originally obviously from Brooklyn, and you went up in Jersey at some point.
Yes, we relocated to New Jersey in December of 2013. So we've been there for over 10 years now.
You guys like veterans, not the COVID transplants.
Definitely not the COVID transplants, yes.
Do you feel, so I don't know if Livingston was a popular place for everyone to move into recently, but do you feel you have a lot of your clients are people who are originally from Brooklyn, New York, or someone who you knew from before in the community? Definitely
during COVID, we saw an increase, people trying to escape the city, not just Manhattan, but even Hoboken, Jersey City. So certainly, and, that's even evident in my kids' schools, where, the classroom size is really quickly inflated in number.
It's probably good for business in that case, right? In that sense.
Yeah, of course it's good for business, but growth, we definitely are family oriented and we're pulling members from the community, but it's not just Livingston. We're very happy when we have customers come to us from surrounding towns, and originally we were really surprised that majority of our customers were not from Livingston, but from nearby towns. And we, for a long time, tried to find answers to that riddle. And it could have been that just maybe it just took us a little bit longer to reach our very immediate and local customers.
Right. So being that you noticed that, are there any plans to maybe expand to different towns?
Always. I mean, originally when we opened, we always wanted to make Exceptional Explorers a franchise. We had those plans. Of course, COVID put a bit of a pause on that. But with the business finally reaching the point where we intended it to be a few years back, I think that is something we're definitely exploring. We're always looking at new venues and trying to figure out if that is something that would make sense.
How did you come up with the name?
I'm not going to take credit. My cousin, she was the one that always enjoyed reading and literature, and she was very savvy with language and her words. So she came up with many options for us. This is just the one we had voted on.
Is that from a book?
No, I don't believe so. I think it really comes down to the classes that she originally really wanted to hold at the space that had to do with exploring various cultures. And she really wanted to tie that aspect into our space.
Definitely catchy. Definitely, if you think about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I like the multiple meanings behind it, right? You could be exploring in so many different ways. And so I think that's why that one was the winner.
How do you find balancing your schoolwork in Department of Education and running this business?
Initially, it was definitely a challenge. I think that I've learned that really when I'm at my job from 7 to 2:30, I have to dedicate myself to my students and my work, and everything after I'm able to then focus on the business. So of course there's a lot of late nights after the kids are done with their basketball classes and their math and their art classes and homework is done, and kitchen is cleaned up, that's when I sit down and I focus. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that is being done since I'm not physically at the business. None of us are. So we had to also find staff.
Which is not easy.
Not easy at all. That is probably the most challenging aspect of the business, is to find staff that loves children, that is invested in growing this business as much as you. And it's very hard because it's not their business. So to find somebody who is trustworthy, reliable, and who also wishes the business to prosper and do well and connect with the customers, because at the end of the day, it's all about making them happy and their kids to enjoy themselves and learn.
Do you have any advice as to how to recruit or incentivize staff that you've learned?
So I think really just reaching out to the community. It has its ups and downs. The truth is, Livingston is a very affluent community, so we don't have many teenagers looking to work. That is not to say there aren't any, and those that we do have, they're amazing, and we could rely on them. They're good at what they do, they're reliable, and they're great with kids. But oftentimes, we also find that during times of vacation, when I think back to my school and college years, I wanted to put more hours in because I could make more money. A lot of our staff tend to leave on vacation with their families as well. And that is when we are in most need of staff, because we run mini camps for working parents during school week, the weeks that schools are closed. We run mini camps in the summer. So finding staff has proven to be very much a challenge.
Was there an actual business plan? Did you actually guys sit down, write up a whole flow chart where this is going to go here, this is going to go there, we're going to need to get financing? And
absolutely.
Was that like a whole thing?
Well,
did you get any help? I'm sorry, with that?
So we definitely had to write a business plan because, even our landlord wanted to see one before he would sign a lease with us. The banks wanted to see one before they would give us any loans to start the business. And members of the community wanted to review to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what it is we're doing, and that we even looked at our competition and had a clear understanding of what it is that we're going to be offering and how we would differentiate ourselves from local competition. So there was definitely a plan. I'm probably going to sound very much like a rookie, but it was just Googling up sample plans and going off that initially.
That's amazing that you were able to put something together that obviously worked off of Google to present, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes these were not even necessarily business plans for an indoor playground. It was just a mere template that we were able to follow, but obviously make it work for our business and our mission.
Did you have support from your family?
Well, from my husband and my cousin's husband, absolutely. Even though for the first few years, I would say my cousin and I did almost everything independently. The last few, the husbands have really stepped in when we were drowning in the most difficult moments, and we realized this was not going to be.
That's why you get married, right?
Absolutely. Why
checking.
else do we keep him around? But yeah, we wouldn't be able to do it without them. And funny how, without really speaking about it, everyone kind of took on their own roles. So my husband is the financially savvy one. So he's definitely been guiding us in how to refinance, how to take out another loan, how do we apply for certain grants that were available for businesses open during COVID.
Right.
Her husband is more technical and also very hands-on. So he's the one there if something breaks or we need somebody to really step in and make sure that, the space is safe. He's there for that. So yeah, family's extremely important. Even just,
well, we know mom said don't work with family. We caught that.
And believe it or not, my cousin and I were very nervous to present this to our parents, who are sisters. They did not like the idea of us opening up a business. As a matter of fact, My mom always raised me to say that, you just need a stable job. We're not a risk takers in our family.
Because they want this stability for you. They want, so you go to work at 8:30, you finish at 5:30 or whatever, and
you take care of the kids, family, right?
My mom was always under the impression that you are born a businessman and it's not something you could learn. So she was sure that is not something for me. I wish I had someone giving me different kind of advice growing up.
I wonder if they went to the same school with my parents. It's like, it's something that has to do with that culture. It's like, listen.
Well, I was just going to say that.
But there's a difference, right? There are people who are risk averse or want to follow the system.
Yeah, but,
and then also from the same background, there are people who are just like incredible risk takers because they had to navigate that old system that was very restrictive, right?
The reason I mentioned that was because whenever I talk to my father about, I'm thinking about starting a business, and he goes, "What do you know about starting a business?"
Google the business plan.
I'm like, listen, Google business plan. Exactly. And he's like, listen, there's those who are born to do business. You can see them. They're young. They hustle and everything like that. And then there's you. You should go to school. That was my whole, from 16 to about 20 something. It's like, go to school, learn something, and, do that trade.
I think maybe being an immigrant in this country also played a big role in that kind of advice that our parents gave us.
Probably because they came here and they had to, they had it much worse than we did. They had to survive, right? My dad had 3 jobs in the first, and he didn't speak a word of English. So,
right.
So they don't want us to go through that hardship, I guess. And that's why they think the best thing is for us just to go to school, get a good job, and don't mess around with businesses.
But I think that idea of you could be anything and you could learn to do anything is very much an American ideal.
But that's what we learned here, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that doesn't come from there. It's what we learned here. And I guess thanks to them for bringing us here. You know what I mean?
So then the other question is, since we did discuss the department balancing your job and the business, there's even the most important, you can't call it a job, but you're a mother, right? Mm-hmm. Of 3 children and a wife. And that must be incredible responsibility. And how do you juggle the family and the work and all the stresses that come with it?
And the business.
I mean,
stress. Yes, that is a number one word these days. I will lie if I'll say there's no guilt involved. There's always guilt. There's always an area where I feel like I could give more of myself, but there just isn't enough time. But of course, and it's a working process. I'm learning every day. I'm learning how to be a good mother while trying to be a good business owner and a good therapist at my job. So it's really just trying to set aside times for each one. And
yeah, I was going to say, so it's not like you're learning, you're in it. You're pretty much doing.
I'm doing, but every day I'm adjusting. Like I said, because I do sometimes go to sleep with this guilty feeling where, my son would say, "Mom, can you just lay with me for a few minutes before going to bed?" And I found myself number of consecutive days just saying, "Well, not today, I just have to do this. And not today, I just have to do that." And then one point, I just remember seeing the disappointment in his face after a number of no's.
He's the eldest, right?
My middle.
Oh, he's the middle, okay.
Yeah, the difficulty of being a middle child, he definitely craves the most attention. And so I remember falling asleep that night and I said, no matter what has to happen the next night, I'm going to make sure to dedicate some time just laying with him. And those are the most precious moments. That's when he opens up about his day, because oftentimes it's just, "How's your day?" "It was good." "Do you have any stories from school?" "Nope." But for some reason, when I do lay down with him at night, that's when
maybe he's
the
calm
gates
and he
open
feels
up,
your warmth, right?
and there's one story after another, and I'm just there caressing him and listening. Sometimes I don't think he really is even looking for a response or an answer. He just
wants to share.
Yes.
Do the other 2 kids participate in this, or you separate your time for each one?
It depends. Yeah. They kind of have their own interests, but if I do read to him sometimes, that's where, or if I read to my youngest, my middle one will sometimes join. He still wants to be part of that bonding experience. My daughter, being the oldest, she she's kind of done with her story time routines, but she enjoys sometimes just nightly conversations as well. So it was just my son and I having a talk about school or something else. She will join in for that. But oftentimes I feel like at night is where they do get their one-on-one time with me.
Does anything prepare you for motherhood?
Oh, no, I feel like you can't prepare, even just thinking back, I'm very much a planner and I'm very organized, and I feel like I need to have everything prepared in my life. But even before going into labor with my daughter, I remember watching so many different videos thinking like, oh, I've explored all the possibilities and I'm prepared for this. And then, of course, you really can't be. So many things get thrown at you that you've never seen or heard of. And since that day, I think that's just been my experience with motherhood, where you feel like you've learned something and you have a good grasp on it. Something new comes up and you're relearning, and with each child, the problems and the challenges are so different because of their personalities. So you're just always learning and adjusting, even between kids, as Mark and I just discussed.
Yeah, we had a conversation before we started, and basically it turns out that our daughters are the same age, right?
Yeah.
And our youngest, well, your youngest, I only have two, so are almost the same age as well. So the daughters definitely is, she's approaching the almost teen years. It's like, leave me alone, let me do my thing, and like, in my case at least. The little one though, he is like, I can totally relate to the fact that, he waits every time I come from work, or if I'm going upstairs, if I'm working from home, and he'll be like, are you done? And I'm like, no, I'm still working. And it's like, he's waiting, like he wants this attention and I want to give it to him, but everybody's busy. It's like, we're trying to start this. I also have a full-time job. There's also a bunch of things that, different bunch of projects. I also help my wife with her a business that she runs, and so it's like, you don't have the time, but, and you get frustrated that you can't give him the time. And I try. So when I do try and I actually get there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend the whole day. And it turns out it's not like he wants anything. He just wants you to be there. Like right next to you. He'll be like, sit down on the couch, and just like, and I'm going to play and you're going to just watch me for now. At least. If you're okay to share, where does the husband fall into this? You got business, work, 3 kids. Is there enough time?
He would say no, but I'm trying. Though I actually think it's very important. And, that was a piece of advice, I think a good piece of advice, because I feel like I've said my mother gave me some poor advice down the line. But one good piece of advice she said is that kids grow up and they will move on, but you need to be able to still know who your husband is and have a relationship with him despite the kids, the job, and everything else going on. So we've always made time for each other. Date nights were very important when we had a live-in nanny. That was definitely easier to plan. The last year with that one and having to renovate our house, so that was another project we were doing parallel to everything else going on. Turned out to be a bit of a challenge with not as much time for each other, but we're kind of getting back on track, I think, now that things are slowly falling back into place and we're back in our house after a renovation.
You guys had to move out for renovation?
We did.
Oh, wow.
We did, because we had to build a second floor, so the roof came off. So that was staying at home was not an option.
But you guys were already friendly with municipality. That was easy. Call Bill from apartment buildings, right? He's like, no problem, I got you.
Slightly different departments. And that was actually something my husband navigated, to be honest. I can't take credit for any permitting that happened.
You guys have division of labor kind of thing in the family based on skill sets, or how does that work?
Yeah.
He manages the money.
And I spend the money.
That's a good arrangement.
Yes, he's certainly the financially responsible one in the family.
So how do you like living in Jersey?
I like it. I think it's a great place to raise a family. People are definitely very community oriented. Not to say that I don't see cliques form even among parents and community members, but overall, I think people are always there. If you have even a small problem and you reach out to the community, people are just willing to help. It just surprises me, from anything small to major. Whether you need a tool that you don't have in the house to fix something, to having a medical diagnosis that you need a second opinion for. People are just jumping to be there to support you and give you their professional advice or suggestions. So I think it's nice being in that kind of community where neighbors know each other by their first name, and your doorbell rings at random times because your neighbor's kids are there to play with yours. I think it's something that I lacked growing up in Brooklyn. So it's very nice to see.
Is there a particular way where people congregate? How do you build these community bonds, or is it just like surrounding neighbors, or is there?
I think it's a variety of things. I'm sure people find those communities within a community in many different ways. But for me, I think my kids starting school, that was my primary way of meeting other parents in town. But of course, also there is, synagogues and churches. And there are a number of community events that are held where you do have opportunities to meet others as well.
You're going to run for mayor?
That is funny enough. An inside joke among our friends, because my husband is very much involved in town politics.
Awesome.
So he attends a lot of events, a lot of meetings, town hall meetings. And in a small town, I think you could be heard.
It's easier than in New York City.
Yeah. So coming from New York City, I think initially I had a hard time understanding why is he getting involved and how is one voice going to make a difference. But I have to say that I have to contribute his efforts to getting our schools open earlier than we're supposed to during the COVID pandemic. It was really his push, along with a few other involved doctors and lawyers in town, who put enough pressure on our superintendent to go back in person from our remote model.
How did you pick that up? It seemed like you knew what you were asking right there.
How did I pick that up? Well, first of all, obviously, I don't know if it's the profession, but she's very eloquent and presentable. So I figured, and she's involved in the community, and she had experience with managing, city affairs, I guess, when opening up a business. So I think I naturally felt like maybe she had some kind of political inclinations.
Oh, definitely not me.
Not you. Okay. But plus I do, the way I understand, in smaller communities, smaller towns, it is easier to be politically involved and have an influence. As opposed to, you live in New York City in 5 boroughs and there's a lot of politics. Plus, it's more difficult to kind of go anywhere if you're interested.
So, okay, we have business, school work, kids, husband, politics, apparently. Maybe.
Apparently.
Maybe. So how do you relax? How do you unwind?
With a glass of wine or a margarita.
Do you have the time for that? I mean, look, it's a lot. You have 3 kids. I have 2. You have a business and a full-time job. I mean, I can barely find time between. And my wife does a lot of work for our family. So how do you find the time?
I mean, it's certainly not easy. And of course, there's not as many opportunities, but I think you make the best of it. And even though they're less frequent, it's all about the quality, right? You make sure that you get, you stay in touch with your friends. I was always a very big believer in, keeping the lines of communication open, making sure to plan, to see friends and to have a good time when you're together. So you're looking forward to seeing each other next time. So when I'm with my friends, we always put a date on the calendar for the next time.
You schedule it.
We schedule it ahead. Of course, there are times when we have to adjust and change, but we try our best to keep to those dates. And once they're in the calendar, it's like a meeting, you're attending that. And this is one of those things that is not going to get moved unless, of course, a true emergency comes up. I mean, I have everything.
You have everything on the calendar? Do you have one of those at home with the little Post-it notes? And does everybody has their own schedule and everything?
So you know what? I am a big fan of paper. I still love writing and checking things off. I think it makes me feel productive. My husband for years has been working on me, trying to make me go more digital. So at one point he said he's going to rip up any paper he finds. He wants everything to be on my phone and shared with family. So we share each other's calendar. This way we're able to make family plans, individual plans. And now our daughter is about to get a phone, and she already was told that she's going to have to join our family calendar. Yes.
Do you have like a structure of chores for your kids?
I do. I do have.
She was so proud about it. I want to hear it all.
Do they get paid?
I do. I mean, I probably could do a better job than I'm doing, but I am a true believer in the fact that kids need to learn responsibility. They need to have an understanding. They started out small, where every morning they had to make their own bed before they even come out of their room. And we've progressed at this point to they each are responsible. They have days and times when they take out their garbage. They have their laundry days assigned to them. Schedule works. It may be a little bit too rigid for some people. Some people are more spontaneous, but I think when I'm not around a lot, having a schedule helps them, and my husband, who has a breakfast schedule for my children, because he said he would have no idea what he would have to do in the morning. But if I write it out for him, he knows exactly what's expected, and it's easier because he's usually the one getting the kids ready in the morning.
Was this podcast on your schedule?
It was. Sometimes it's even embarrassing, the kind of things I put on the calendar. But if it's not on my calendar, I mean, if I don't have it on the calendar, I will forget to pick up my child from their class. So I need to have it on the calendar.
It seems like time management is a skill you have. That's probably what allows you to be everywhere at this, maybe not the same time, but in general too.
I think if I had to pick my own personal strength, it would be organization.
Organizational skills, right?
Yes. I am extremely organized. My husband would complain that my OCD is really what's driving me. But I think I do like things planned and in order to happen in orderly fashion. Sometimes I am rigid as a result, and something that I am working on is being more flexible.
So in that case, how do you deal with stress? How do you manage that?
Oh, I wish I had good advice. I mean, I'm still learning, but to be very honest with you, one thing I found very helpful is I listened to Mel Robbins' podcast on the way to work. She's all about...
not that Robinson guy. That's...
not Tony Robbins.
Not Tony Robbins.
Yeah, but funny that they both share the same last name. And, their podcasts have something in common too. It's about, self-improvement and happiness. But something about Mel Robbins' podcast in particular, it's about very realistic possible things from something, simple as listen to birds chirping, even if it's not live birds, but just a recording. And there's a lot of research apparently that's, that was used to prove that listening to birds chirping really calms us down. And it could be maybe evolutionary speaking. We used to wake up in nature to birds chirping, and that means it's a calm, quiet kind of day. So I found myself sometimes before my work day, I listen to a few birds.
Birds chirp?
Yes.
Awesome. What are your immediate goals? Like, do you have something in the near future that you set for yourself?
So I think my immediate, considering we just had such a wild year with the renovation, I think I want to actually focus more on my kids. I feel like I would often drop them off somewhere because we had to go pick out materials or meet with contractors. They would go to sleep sometimes without me being home. And my biggest fear is for us to start growing apart, especially with my daughter not being a teenager and naturally not needing me as much, or trying to separate herself and find her own self, I guess, as a, an adult to be. So I think that on a personal level, my goal is to really focus on my kids. But at the same time, since I'm approaching my 40s, I am evaluating my life and trying to see, am I satisfied? Am I fulfilled? Is this what I wanted? Or am I looking for something else? What's my next big project? Or what am I going to do with my existing projects, and what level am I going to take it to?
And what's the analysis, if you like to share?
It's still a work in progress.
Work in progress, okay.
Yes. The questions are there. The answers, I'm not sure.
Right.
They're floating. I'm trying to grasp at them. But one thing I know for sure is that, after this last year, I'm going to focus more on my kids and my relationship with them.
All right. I mean, well, can you offer any advice for people that maybe want to get into, speech therapy and maybe open a business?
For people who are considering speech therapy, I think it's a great field. I think it's amazing to be in any job where you could be helpful to others. In this particular field, you work with a lot of people who really depend on you to better their lives. So I think you could get a lot out of that in the personal level, but also knowing that you've helped someone. I think it's a great job for a woman. There's definitely some flexibility. There's so many settings where you could work, as we discussed that earlier. You could start a private practice, you could work in a school, you could work in a clinic, you could work in a hospital. And with that comes so many different disorders that you could address. So really, it's kind of like, take your pick from that. It's a well-paid job. There's certainly better paid jobs out there, but I think you could definitely make a nice living if you're working a lot, or it could just be a side gig if, you're in a very financially comfortable place, but you just want to help someone. It could be a part-time job. So there are definitely a lot of perks and benefits, I think.
Well, I guess that's it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Mila,
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule.
We get the honor of being in the calendar.
We were in the calendar.
Yeah.
Appreciate for coming on and sharing your expertise and your experiences. So thank you very much.
And
we
for
appreciate
those who have kids in the Livingston or surrounding areas,
we'll link everything down below,
Yeah.
of course. But yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers.